I've always been careful online, or at least I thought I was. I used VPNs, encrypted my passwords, and never clicked on weird links. But somehow my data got leaked on the dark web. It all started when I noticed my phone acting up, random apps crashing, messages disappearing, and a few unexplained charges on my card. The worst part, I didn't even know it was happening until it was too late. I was on my way home from work when I got a strange text from a number I didn't recognize. "We know who you are." I thought it was spam or some messed up prank. I ignored it, but then another text came through. "Check your front door." Chills crawled up my spine and my stomach dropped. I had a gut feeling this wasn't a joke. When I got home, my front door wasn't just unlocked, it was wide open. Someone had been inside. I rushed in, looking around. Everything seemed fine. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, but something felt off. I headed to my computer, hoping to see if I'd been hacked or something. When I powered it on, the screen was frozen on a black window with a message. "Your data is ours. If you want to live, transfer $50,000 to this wallet. 24 hours. Don't run. Don't call the cops. We're watching." I panicked, obviously. I'm just some regular guy. I don't have that kind of money. And I didn't know what the hell I'd done to deserve this. I called the cops anyway, but they just treated it like I was making some prank call. They told me to report it to my bank, check my credit score, normal stuff. No one believed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my windows and doors, expecting someone to break in. The whole thing felt like a nightmare, but it was real, and it was only about to get worse. Way worse. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of tires screeching outside my apartment. I peeked through the blinds. There were 2 black SUVs parked across the street, engines still running, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Something in my gut told me they were here for me. My phone buzzed again. "You have 6 hours. What the hell was I supposed to do? I didn't have 50 grand lying around, and even if I did, I wasn't about to hand it over to some random thugs from the dark web. I packed a bag and decided to leave town, just drive as far as I could. But when I stepped out of my apartment, I didn't even make it to my car.
A guy was standing at the entrance, smoking a cigarette like he'd been waiting for me. He wasn't dressed like a thug. He looked normal, like the type of guy you'd pass by on the street without a second thought. But his eyes, man, they were cold, dead. He flicked his cigarette to the ground and started walking toward me. I don't know what got into me, but I bolted back inside, slamming the door behind me. Moments later, the guy started banging on the door, yelling something in a language I didn't understand. I ran to the window, and that's when I saw another guy coming up the back alley. This wasn't just some random scare tactic. They were coming for me. I didn't have a gun, but I had a baseball bat. I grabbed it and stood by the door, shaking. I could hear them outside, talking in low voices. The banging stopped, and everything went quiet. Then, a loud crash came from the back of the house. They'd broken in. I ran down the hall and swung the bat as hard as I could at the first guy who came through. It connected with his face, and he went down hard. Blood splattered the walls, and he didn't move. But I didn't have time to think. There were 2 more guys behind him, and one of them pulled out a gun. Without thinking, I grabbed the guy's gun from the floor and fired back. I don't know if I hit anyone, but the shots were enough to make them back off for a second. That gave me enough time to run to my car. I jumped in, heart pounding, hands shaking, and slammed the gas pedal down. The tires screeched, and I peeled out of there, but the black SUVs were right behind me. I was speeding through the city like I was in some kind of action movie. I weaved through traffic, ran red lights, nearly slammed into a bus. They were gaining on me. The car chase felt like it went on forever. My phone kept buzzing with more threats, but I couldn't focus on them. I had bigger problems, like not getting shot in the back of the head. Suddenly, a bullet shattered my back window. Glass flew everywhere, cutting into my skin, but I didn't stop. I pushed the pedal harder, trying to outrun them. I thought I could make it if I just made it to the highway, but then they rammed my car from the side. I lost control and crashed into a guardrail, my car spinning out of control. Everything slowed down. My vision blurred and all I could hear was the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I thought I was done for, but before I could catch my breath, they were on me. The driver of one of the SUVs jumped out with a gun in hand, heading straight for me. I knew I couldn't fight them off, not with a bat and a stolen gun. I was bleeding, dizzy and scared out of my mind. But then, the sirens. I've never been so relieved to see police lights in my life. The guys hesitated for just a second, then jumped back in their cars and sped off before the cops could reach them. The cops didn't care that I was hurt, bleeding, or that my car was totaled. All they wanted to know was why I had a gun, why there was a dead body in my house, and why the hell I'd been running from some black SUVs. I tried explaining, but they didn't believe me. All they saw was a bloody guy with a gun in a crashed car. They arrested me on the spot. I spent the next 48 hours in a jail cell, trying to convince them I wasn't some kind of criminal. But then, something strange happened. The cops who arrested me, they disappeared. Like literally. I was told they were reassigned and then I was released without any further explanation. When I got home, there was a note under my door. "We're not done yet." This was just the beginning. I was being hunted, and whoever these people were, they weren't going to stop until I was dead. And that's when I realized the cops weren't going to save me. No one could. You know that feeling when you wake up and for a split second you think everything is fine? That fleeting moment of peace before reality slaps you in the face. Yeah, I didn't get that. Not after what happened. I couldn't sleep for more than an hour at a time without waking up, drenched in sweat, every little noise sounding like a gunshot outside my window. I didn't know how to move on from that. The note under my door haunted me. "We're not done yet." It was like a death sentence. I knew those guys weren't playing games. And the fact that the cops just released me without any real explanation, that wasn't a good sign either. It felt like I was trapped, like everyone was in on it. Everyone except me.
I couldn't go back to work. Hell, I didn't even know if I could step outside without being followed again. The guys in the black SUVs hadn't come back, but that didn't mean they wouldn't. I tried to lie low, keeping the blinds shut, turning off my phone. I even considered getting a burner phone, but then I realized they probably knew everything about me by now. Where I lived, my family, my friends, everything. My paranoia was getting worse. I swear I could hear footsteps outside my door at night. Every creak, every rustle of leaves outside made my heart race. I stopped turning on the lights because I didn't want them to see me moving around inside. It's like I became a prisoner in my own home. Then one night things got really ******ed up. It was around midnight. I was sitting on the couch, the TV on mute, just trying to keep my mind off everything. I heard a knock at the door, not a loud one, just a soft, almost hesitant knock. My body went cold. Nobody knocks at midnight unless it's trouble. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. But whoever it was knocked again, louder this time. And then, from the other side of the door, I heard it. A voice I hadn't heard in years. "Open up, man. It's me, Alex." Alex, my best friend since high school. We'd lost touch after he moved out of state, and I hadn't heard from him in over a year. What the hell was he doing here? And at this time of night? But here's the thing. Something in my gut told me it wasn't him. Not really. His voice sounded off, like someone had studied the way he spoke and tried to imitate it. Too calm. Too rehearsed. "I know you're in there, dude. I need to talk to you. It's about what happened. Just let me in, okay?" I stood frozen, gripping the bat that I'd kept next to me since the last attack. My hands were slick with sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to explode out of my chest. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. Then, the door handle started to turn. I bolted to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and ducked behind the counter. I was shaking, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The sound of the handle jiggling stopped, and there was silence for what felt like an eternity. Suddenly the door slammed open, the lock snapping like it was nothing. My stomach dropped as heavy footsteps entered the apartment. I peeked around the corner and there he was, Alex. Or at least, someone who looked like him. But it wasn't him. His face was wrong. The way he moved, the way his eyes darted around the room. It didn't match the guy I used to know. His smile was too wide, his eyes too cold. And that's when I noticed the gun in his hand. I don't know what possessed me to move, but I charged at him with the knife, swinging wildly. I didn't even think. I just acted on pure terror. The blade grazed his arm, and he let out a guttural growl, not a scream, but this low, animalistic sound that I swear no human should be able to make. He shoved me back, hard, and I hit the ground so fast it knocked the wind out of me. As I gasped for air, I saw him raise the gun. Time slowed down again, just like it did in the car chase. This was it. This was how I was going to die. In my kitchen, by someone who looked like my best friend, but wasn't. But then, something unexpected happened. A gunshot rang out, but it didn't hit me. It hit him. The guy, Alex, or whoever he was, dropped to the floor, blood pooling around his head. Standing in the doorway was a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, bald, and wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my rent. He lowered his gun and stared at me with a cold, calculating gaze. "Get up," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "We need to talk." I didn't have the energy to argue. I slowly stood, still clutching the knife in my trembling hand. The guy didn't seem threatened by me at all. He just stared at the body on the floor and then back at me. "You've gotten yourself into some deep shit, my friend," he said, lighting a cigarette like we weren't standing in the middle of a murder scene. "They want you dead, but I need you alive, for now." "Who the hell are you?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. "That's not important," he replied, blowing out a cloud of smoke. "What's important is that you understand something. You're a loose end. They don't like loose ends." I glanced at the body again, my stomach churning. This was all too much. I wasn't built for this. I wasn't a fighter or some action hero. I was just a guy who got in over his head. "Why me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What the hell do they want from me?" He took a drag from his cigarette and sighed. "You pissed off the wrong people, the kind of people who don't forgive. They know everything about you, your name, your habits, your connections. And now they know you're a threat." "A threat?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm no threat to anyone," he smirked, flicking his cigarette to the floor. "Not yet." Before I could ask what he meant, there was another knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. This time, it wasn't a soft knock. It was loud, demanding, like someone was about to break the door down. I looked at the guy, but he didn't seem surprised. "They're here," he said, pulling out his gun again. "This is your last chance. Come with me, or die here." I didn't have a choice. The door burst open again, and 3 men stormed in, guns raised. I dove behind the kitchen counter just as gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood. The guy in the suit fired back, hitting one of the attackers square in the chest. He dropped like a sack of bricks. I didn't even think. I grabbed the gun from Alex's, the imposter's dead body, and started shooting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely aim, but somehow I hit one of the guys in the leg. He screamed and collapsed, but the last guy kept coming. I heard the suit guy shout something, but my ears were ringing too loudly to make it out. I just kept firing, praying that I'd hit something, anything. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, the last guy was dead on the floor, blood seeping into the cracks of my wooden floor. The suit guy was standing over him, breathing heavily but still composed. "You're lucky," he said, holstering his gun, "but you're not safe." I didn't feel lucky. I felt like I was about to puke. "We need to leave. Now." And just like that, I was back in survival mode. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and whatever I could fit in my pockets. As we bolted out of the apartment, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever be able to escape this nightmare. But deep down, I already knew the answer. There was no escaping this. Not anymore. We sped out of my neighborhood like hell was on our heels. I didn't even have a chance to grab anything besides my phone and wallet. The guy in the suit, whoever he was, didn't say a word as he drove. The city lights blurred past us, and I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow, like I was hyperventilating. My hands were still sticky with sweat and blood, the gun I'd grabbed earlier sitting heavy in my lap. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't even sure I wanted to know the answer. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the road, one hand gripping the wheel, the other resting casually on the gun holstered under his jacket. "Now, we figure out why they're still after you." "They said they wanted money," I said, staring out the window as the city blurred by. 50 grand or they'd kill me. I didn't pay. That's why they came." He shook his head, a faint smirk on his lips, like I'd said something naive. "That was the excuse. They were testing you. If you had paid, it wouldn't have stopped. It never stops with these people."
My stomach churned. The knot of fear in my chest tightened, and I could feel the adrenaline still rushing through my veins, making me jittery, on edge. What do they want from me? I'm just some regular guy. I don't have money or power or anything they'd want. He didn't answer right away, just kept driving. We eventually turned off the main streets, heading down darker, quieter roads, the kind of places people don't go unless they have to. "They want something more valuable than money," he finally said, glancing over at me. "Information. They think you have something, or maybe you saw something you shouldn't have, and until they get it, they're not going to stop." That didn't make any sense. What the hell could I possibly have seen? I was careful online. Sure, I'd been curious and browsed a few sketchy forums here and there, but nothing too deep, nothing that would get me involved with Mafia-level shit, or at least that's what I thought. As we pulled into an abandoned parking lot, a sense of dread crept over me. There was no one around, just empty buildings and broken streetlights. It felt like we were in the middle of nowhere, cut off from the rest of the world. The car engine went silent as he killed the ignition, and he turned to me with a serious look in his eyes. "You need to understand something," he said, his voice low and cold. "These people, they don't care about the law. They don't care about your life. If you're a loose end, they'll do whatever it takes to tie you up." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket, and there was a new message from an unknown number. "Last chance. We're coming for you." I showed him the message, my hands shaking. "What do I do? They're still after me." He glanced at the phone, then back at me, his expression unreadable. "It's not just you anymore. You're a liability to everyone around you. Friends, family, anyone connected to you. They're all targets." I felt like I was going to be sick. My family. I hadn't even thought about them in all this chaos. My parents, my sister. They didn't know any of this was happening. They were just living their lives, oblivious to the danger I'd dragged them into. "They'll use them to get to you," he said flatly, lighting another cigarette. "It's how they work." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to think of how to warn them, how to get them somewhere safe. But where was safe? If these people were as powerful as he made them sound, they could find anyone, anywhere. As if he could read my thoughts, the guy in the suit leaned in, his cold eyes locking onto mine. "You need to decide what you're willing to do to survive this, because if you want to protect the people you care about, you're going to have to fight, and it's going to get bloody." I didn't want to fight. I wasn't some action hero, but I didn't have a choice, did I? They wouldn't stop. They wouldn't leave me or my family alone. Suddenly, headlights flooded the parking lot. My stomach dropped, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. 2 more black SUVs pulled in, their engines roaring like predators closing in on their prey. "Get down!" the suit guy barked, pulling his gun out. I ducked behind the dashboard, heart racing, trying to keep my head down as the SUVs stopped a few yards away. The sound of doors opening and closing echoed in the empty lot, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. I peeked over the dashboard and saw 4 men stepping out of the SUVs, all armed, all looking like they were here to end this once and for all. The suit guy didn't hesitate. He rolled down his window and fired the first shot, hitting one of the men in the chest. Chaos erupted. Bullets sprayed across the car, shattering the windows. I could hear the whine of metal being torn apart, the glass shattering above me, but all I could do was stay low and hope I didn't get hit. I heard the suit guy curse under his breath as he reloaded. "Stay down," he growled, firing off more shots. I could see the bodies piling up outside, but they kept coming, more of them spilling out of the SUVs like a swarm. I didn't even realize I was screaming until I felt the guy grab me by the collar and drag me out of the car. "Move!" he shouted, yanking me to my feet. We ran for cover behind one of the nearby buildings, the sound of gunfire still ringing in my ears. I could barely think, barely process what was happening. All I knew was that I wasn't dead yet, and I needed to keep it that way. We huddled behind a dumpster, bullets whizzing past us. I couldn't tell who was shooting or how many there were. Everything was chaos, blood, smoke, the smell of burning rubber and metal. "Why the hell are they still coming?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "I thought we killed enough of them."
"You don't understand," he said, reloading his gun with quick, practiced movements. "They won't stop. Not until you're dead, or they get what they want." My mind was spinning, trying to wrap itself around this nightmare. This wasn't just a gunfight. This was a goddamn war, and I had no idea what side I was even on anymore. My body ached, my muscles screaming from the adrenaline and fear, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now. We needed to make a run for it. We couldn't stay pinned down forever, not with more of them coming. I could see the silhouette of another man creeping around the corner, his gun raised, his eyes locked on us. The suit guy noticed him at the same time I did. Without a word, he shoved me back and stood up, firing 3 clean shots. The guy went down, blood spraying across the pavement. I was in over my head, way over my head. As we made our move, ducking and weaving between the shadows, my mind raced. I needed to figure out why this was happening. What had I done to get on their radar? Was it really something I'd seen? Something I shouldn't have? Or was this just some sick game, and I was the unlucky idiot caught in the middle? I couldn't stop thinking about the message. We're not done yet. How long was this going to go on? How much more blood was going to be spilled before they were done with me? There's a moment when fear stops feeling like fear and becomes something darker, something colder. You stop thinking about the consequences. You stop worrying about whether or not you'll survive. Instead, your mind shifts, and all that matters is the next second, the next breath. I had hit that point. We had managed to escape the parking lot, barely. My ears were still ringing from the gunfire. My muscles ached like I'd been hit by a train, and I couldn't stop shaking. I was running on adrenaline and sheer survival instinct now. There was no thinking, no rationalizing. It was just move or die. The suit guy, who still hadn't told me his name, was driving like a maniac, weaving through back roads and alleys I didn't even know existed in this part of the city. I was slumped in the passenger seat, clutching the gun in my lap, my hands trembling. The blood on my clothes had dried and cracked, leaving rust-colored streaks across my jeans. "We're going underground," he said suddenly, jerking the car into a dark, narrow alley. The tires screeched, and we almost hit a wall as he pulled into a loading bay behind an old abandoned building. "Underground?" I muttered, barely able to focus. "What the hell are you talking about?"
He killed the engine and looked at me, his cold eyes flicking over my battered, bloodied form. "You're not safe above ground anymore. They'll keep coming, and they won't stop until they've got what they want. We need to disappear." Disappear. It felt like a joke. How was I supposed to disappear when I was being hunted by God knows how many people, all armed, all intent on killing me? But I didn't argue. I didn't have any other options. We got out of the car and headed into the building. The place was a wreck. Broken windows, graffiti covering the walls, the stench of mildew and rotting wood. It was the kind of place where you wouldn't be surprised to find a body in the corner, and I could almost feel the weight of the ghosts lingering in the air. "Down here," he said, leading me through a hidden door in the back, down a flight of stairs that creaked and groaned under our feet. As we descended, the air got colder, damp, and the walls were lined with old, rusted pipes. It felt like we were entering the belly of some forgotten beast. The silence down here was suffocating, like the walls were absorbing every sound, every breath. My heart pounded in my chest, and I had to fight the urge to run back up the stairs. At the bottom, we entered a room lit by a single flickering bulb. There were maps on the walls, old computer monitors, and piles of equipment I couldn't even begin to identify. It looked like some kind of war room, but it was old, like it had been abandoned for years before we showed up. He motioned for me to sit down at a dusty table, and I collapsed into the chair, my legs barely able to hold me up anymore. My head was spinning. I had no idea what was happening anymore. This wasn't just a car chase or a gunfight. This was something bigger, something way out of my league. "You're probably wondering why they're so intent on killing you," he said, pacing in front of me. "You stumbled into something you weren't supposed to see. That's why they've been hunting you." I rubbed my temples, trying to make sense of everything. "What did I see? I don't even know what the hell you're talking about." He stopped pacing and leaned against the table, looking me dead in the eyes. "You were on the dark web, right? Browsing, looking around. You found something. Something buried deep. Something you weren't supposed to find." I didn't find anything," I stammered, my mind racing. "You did," he cut me off, his voice cold and certain. "Maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but you accessed a file that belongs to some very dangerous people, and now they think you know too much." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "I don't know anything. I didn't even open any files, I swear." He smirked, lighting another cigarette. "Doesn't matter. To them, you're a loose end, and loose ends don't live long." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "So what now? I just hide down here forever? Wait for them to come kill me?" He took a long drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling around him like a ghost. "No. We fight back." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Fight back? Against them? The guys who had been hunting me, the ones with endless resources, guns, and no hesitation to kill. How the hell were we supposed to fight back? Before I could respond, the door upstairs creaked open. We both froze. Footsteps echoed down the stairs, heavy, deliberate. "They found us," the suit guy whispered, his voice tight. He pulled his gun, motioning for me to stay behind him. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. This was it. They were here, and I didn't even know how many of them there were. 2? 3? 20? The footsteps got closer, slow and methodical, like they were taking their time, enjoying the hunt. I gripped my gun, my knuckles white, trying to steady my breath. The first man appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his face shadowed by the dim light. He wasn't wearing a mask, but his expression was cold, emotionless. He had a gun in his hand, and behind him I could see the silhouettes of 2 more men. I sat there in that dim, cold room, staring at the man I had just killed, his blood slowly seeping across the floor. The stench of it filled the air, metallic, suffocating. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, and no matter how many deep breaths I tried to take, I couldn't stop trembling. It felt like I'd stepped into a nightmare that had no exit. The suit guy grabbed my arm, pulling me up from the ground. "We don't have time for this," he snapped. "More will be coming. They always send more." I tried to find my voice, but it came out broken, choked. "How many of them are there?" He didn't answer. Instead, he dragged me toward a back exit hidden behind some old crates. "Enough that you need to forget everything you know about your life. From now on, you're not you anymore." That was it. The moment I realized I was no longer just some guy caught in a bad situation. They had my data, my name, my family. They knew everything about me. I was their target, and there was no undoing what I'd done. I'd already killed, already crossed a line I could never step back over. We stumbled out into a narrow alley, and for the first time in what felt like hours, I tasted fresh air, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The suit guy shoved me into another car, a beat-up old sedan this time. It was less conspicuous, but the second I sat down, I felt the weight of everything crush me. "What now?" I asked, staring blankly out the window as the city flickered by in shadows and neon lights. My voice was hollow, my mind detached. I was running on autopilot,
and I didn't know how to get back in control. Now we make sure they can't find you again. You're going off the grid, completely. Off the grid? The words felt foreign, like I was living someone else's life. What about my family? Your family is a liability, he cut me off coldly. If they can't use them to get to you, they'll kill them. You can't contact them. You can't be near them.
The weight of his words hit me harder than any of the punches, the gunshots, or the killings I'd witnessed. My chest tightened, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. My family, my sister, my parents, all the people I loved were now targets because of me, and I couldn't protect them. I couldn't even see them again. "You don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "They're all I have. They're the only reason I'm still—" He slammed on the brakes, pulling the car over sharply. The sudden stop jolted me forward, my chest slamming into the seatbelt. "Listen to me," he said, turning toward me, his voice low, dangerous. "You don't have a choice. If you contact them, they're dead. Do you get that? You're on your own now." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't want to cry in front of this man who seemed so unaffected by everything. How could he be so cold, so detached? How many people had he killed? How many lives had he destroyed? I didn't answer him. I couldn't. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, leaving the city behind and heading into some rural, forgotten part of the state. The trees grew thicker, the roads darker, and the weight in my chest grew heavier. I had no idea where we were going. Every mile we drove felt like another nail in the coffin of my old life. Eventually, we pulled up to an old cabin, deep in the woods, hidden from the world. There were no neighbors, no sounds of civilization, just the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of night animals. The place looked abandoned, like it hadn't been lived in for years. "This is your new home," he said, nodding toward the cabin. "You'll stay here until I figure out what's next." I got out of the car, my legs heavy, my mind numb. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the smell of damp wood and decay hitting me like a punch to the gut. The interior was just as bad as the outside, bare, cold, and devoid of life. There was an old mattress on the floor, a few cans of food on the counter, and a rusty sink. That was it. "This can't be real," I muttered, stepping inside. It felt like a cage, not a sanctuary. "It's real," he said, following me in. "You'll stay here. No phone, no internet, no contact with the outside world. If you leave, they'll find you." I turned to him, anger bubbling up inside me. "And what the hell are you going to do? You just leave me here, alone, while they hunt me?" He didn't flinch. "I'll be back when I have a plan. Until then, stay out of sight. Don't trust anyone." And just like that, he left. He got back into the car and drove off, leaving me standing in the doorway of that rotting cabin, alone with nothing but my thoughts, and the crushing realization that my life was over. The first few days were the worst. Every creak, every snap of a twig outside made me jump. I barely slept, and when I did, it was in short bursts of nightmare-filled exhaustion. I kept waiting for them to find me, for the SUVs to pull up, for men with guns to storm in. But they never came. Not yet, anyway. By the end of the first week, I'd lost track of time. I stopped counting the days and started existing in a kind of fog, drifting between the paranoia and the numbness. I didn't know how long I could survive like this, alone, constantly waiting for death to knock on the door. And then, one night, it did. I was asleep when I heard it. A soft knock, just like the one that had started all this. My eyes snapped open, my heart racing, my body frozen with fear. I lay there in the dark, holding my breath, waiting. The knock came again, louder this time. I got up slowly, every part of me screaming not to, but I couldn't just lie there, waiting for them to kick the door in. I grabbed the gun that the suit guy had left behind, my hands shaking as I approached the door. The knock came a third time. I took a deep breath and flung the door open, the gun raised, ready to fire. But there was no one there. I stepped outside, the the cold night air biting into my skin. The trees rustled, the wind howling through the branches, but the cabin was empty. No SUVs, no men with guns, just me in the dark. And then I saw it. A single piece of paper tacked to the doorframe. "We're still watching." My blood ran cold. This nightmare was far from over.